Sure. Drop that table off. See it? We have to get to. Thank you. What's that? I know, right? Way more people now. I know she didn't have a sign. I think she should get a sign.
To get warm here.
He turned it down already.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Kyle's like, make it cold.
Yeah.
Or keep it cold.
Got warm
Make
last
it
time.
cold, yeah.
Get nervous when people
Make it cold.
I'm Kyle. Good meeting you. At least I met you, right? We'll be blowing in my ears, spitting the watch right back at school.
I'm gonna make sure if I move back. And if I do, just smack it back the head. She's out. She's out. Yeah.
I'm aware. He stalks my girlfriend.
What's wrong?
The last show we
Always on the airplanes.
we're at, yeah, he walked the dog by our house.
He lives over there. He lives in New York. Yeah. She was up the front yard the other day.
I know, he got over it.
He's on that since she had a shop.
What are you doing missing?
Stuff I brought with me. That was balance.
I have it.
All right. If I could have everybody's attention, it's 6 o'clock and we will call our meeting to order. Alyssa, you'll be taking roll call?
Yep.
All right. And our new business is to discuss and review community feedback regarding the data center ordinance. I believe Alyssa and Greg, our city attorney, met with Soren, our attorney we hired to help us construct or draft a data center ordinance. And I believe you had a discussion and meeting with him. Are you willing to lead us through this?
Yeah. I think I was volunteered to kind of help introduce this and guide. So maybe I'll give a quick introduction and background. There's a lot of people from the public, some of which are new faces to our meetings. So about 3 weeks ago, we met as a joint board. This is a whole bunch of people because it's not just the city council. It also includes the planning and zoning board and the members of the EDA. So we've had a bunch of joint meetings starting back late last fall or early December or early winter, and regrouped after the draft was done to review that. So 3 weeks ago, Soren Maddock, an attorney from Campbell and Knutson up in the cities, came, walked us through that draft ordinance in relative detail. And that was really, I'd call a learning session. It was everybody's chance to hear from him what that ordinance entailed and what it did and didn't do. We didn't have a lot of time for discussion that night because that took enough time. So we decided to meet again tonight, I think for two purposes. One, to gather any feedback people had after listening to that and reviewing it from the board. But then also in the meantime, the public was invited that evening to submit comments if they had any in writing. And a number of people did. I think there are 42 approximately submissions. So Alyssa compiled all of that, gathered it from the public, compiled that, shared it with everybody. And we'll have a chance tonight too to review that, discuss that, pull in things we want to talk about and discuss further. Unfortunately, Soren had a conflict. He does a lot of municipal work, so a lot of evening meetings. So he couldn't be here tonight. That's why Alyssa and I and Chris was there too, jumped on a call this afternoon just to talk through kind of some of the highlights of those comments so that we could be better prepared, hopefully to answer your questions and kind of speak to the extent we're able what his views might be on some of these things too. So an end outcome, hopefully after this discussion tonight, is we can take our notes, Alyssa and I or whoever else, back to Soren to say, all right, here's what people think on these issues. Here's what needs to be changed in an updated draft. At least I think that's the track we're on. And so how to do that efficiently was something we discussed. And the best idea, the public comments were lengthy. It's like 80 PDF pages. And so what we had proposed would be Alyssa created a summary of those comments that kind of synthesized the main ideas. And so I think those were shared with you guys as well. The one I'm speaking specifically of is what's called Packet A, ordinance specific comments and requested revisions. And so my best idea was we go through that as a starting point, talk about those main consistent themes that came out from the public comments. And then after that, leave it open for any other things that were missed or weren't considered in that, either you guys gleaned out the public comments and reviewed them or that you had in your own list for further discussion consideration. So that was our best idea of how to efficiently manage our time tonight so that we make good use of it. Does that sound good to folks at the table?
Sounds good to me.
I should add one more thing. The question has come up about public comment and when does the public get a chance to do that? The invitation to submit written comments is not legally required. That was just trying to incorporate as much community participation as possible in a manageable way. But there does have to be a public hearing at some point before an ordinance like this could be adopted. That isn't tonight. Again, it's probably too much to squeeze all that in one night, but that would be coming at a future date, a date yet to be determined. But just so the public is aware, you're not being shut out of being able to orally communicate your comments as well. That will come at a later time. Any questions from folks before we proceed?
Are we taking customer for public questions?
That's up to.
I think the question is, how do we get the rest of the people in the room?
Yeah.
I think they're out of chairs out there as well.
What are you supposed to do? Watch on the phone.
If there's more chairs out there, you
Are we
guys
online?
can come in
Tell
here.
them you do.
Yeah, I'll sit on the floor if somebody wants to wait here.
It is also being streamed right now live. So if somebody would rather have the comfort of their own home, they can definitely do that.
I know one of the challenges with moving to the gym is always then we can't live stream it with how our technology is set up. So,
And the audio doesn't work well in the gym. I mean, we have to transport all this to the gym and it just doesn't work.
all right. So if you have, you can follow along if you want. There's some points I wanted to call out that I think just merit discussion and talking to Soren about how to change the draft. Are we
You asked for questions.
from the board?
So when did the citizens get to speak?
Not,
Just at the public hearing.
When we have a public hearing, people will have an opportunity to speak. Tonight, we're trying to get through the feedback that was submitted in writing. And so the challenge of letting anybody speak up anytime they wanted is I would fear we wouldn't get through what we needed to be able to provide feedback to Soren for that next draft. Sure, I could try. Yeah. So if I'm going to kind of go in order, which follows mostly the order of the ordinance. And as we speak about things, if people have other related comments, just throw them in. I'm talking to people on the board. And this is meant to be informal and our chance to try to discuss and improve. So kind of the first theme, if you see in the definition section, some people questioned, what does it really mean, or how do we better define closed loop cooling system? And so I think in our heads, just from the comments in past meetings, I think that still might mean different things to different people at the table. So really, I guess the point of question is, when we talk about no water usage for cooling, do we literally mean not a single drop of water goes in those pipes? Or do we mean just no continuous water, that they can fill it every once in a while and refill it every once in a while when they need to flush? So I think we need to pin that down, because if we know our answer to that, then we can better define and narrow in on the proper definition.
What does once in a while constitute?
If they're using a closed loop system and it's going to be either glycol or whatever the substance is, they don't ever have to have water, right? So
That's not
Point of order.
That is not
please, excuse us, please. We're trying to discuss something here. You guys have already heard you're going to have a public meeting. We need to go through this. I'm asking a question is all I'm doing. If this is going to happen every time we ask a question,
Excuse me, I just want to lay down some ground rules. So we have had a number of public meetings in the construction of the ordinance that we have to date, and we're trying to hone in, and we allowed public comment from the last meeting. Anybody who wanted to make public comment was asked to submit that to us. And we have those comments. So if I'm hearing somebody saying, when do we get to comment? You've had multiple times in the past, and there will be times in the future. Any ordinance that's voted on has to have a public hearing. And that is when the public can speak to those. For the purpose of this meeting, we can't have 40, 50 people talking at the same time.
telling us lies.
we haven't
would
said
say-
anything yet.
Yeah.
We just started. And now you're calling us liars. We just started. Okay, can I finish my question? On the closed loop system that they're talking about, it's supposed to be a different substance than water. So water shouldn't be used in the system.
I believe we can take that position if we want to. I'm just trying
I
to
mean,
clarify.
that's the way I've
Is
been
that our
understanding
position?
it so far, is that it's not going to be water cooled.
Okay.
Clarify that.
So-
That's-
So is that a position we're all comfortable with, or at least enough of us to move forward and say we're going to define it as absolutely zero water?
Good with that.
The thing with a closed loop system is it would use very little water. That would be defined, I believe, in a cup. What we're trying to do is come up with an ordinance that would place requirements and restrictions on any data center type business that would go in that technology park that we have annexed.
I guess I would say if we, maybe this is a good time to clarify. So we're working on the ordinance language, and all this is within the conditional use framework. So when a person applies, there will still be a chance to do some scrutinizing of the application and say, oh, by the way, you also got to do this, this, and this. But the big things, and I would call water a big thing. I would argue we want buttoned down the ordinance itself. So they know going into it what the big rules are. So that's why I'm trying to clarify, is it zero water, or is it something different than that? And based on that answer, then we can further pin down the definition, I think, to address those concerns. So it's clearer, because right now the language in the draft ordinance is just referring to closed loop. And like I said, that can mean different things to different people. It can mean zero water, or it could mean fill it every once in a while, but don't keep drawing continuously.
But we have the 60,000 gallon threshold in there, right?
Per month.
Per month.
They added the 60,000 per month is what was added
Okay.
from last. Yep.
in the original draft, it didn't specify a time, so.
Yep.
Which is based off similar to what?
That is, and I'll try to speak up because I don't have a mic in front of me, but that is based on, so we looked at the school and what their usage is. We looked at some of the other big businesses in town. For the school, at the most, it was like 52,000 gallons a month, and that's during the busy times. Now, granted, there's a lot of kids in the school. I mean, we're trying to compare. So that number we can increase it, we can decrease it. We were just trying to come up with what makes sense.
So that seems like a lot more than 720,000 gallons a year, which is quite a bit more than we looked at with school consumption. It seems like a lot to me.
I use over 10,000 gallons a month in my business.
Well, I have a number here of 400,000 from our April meeting. That was given to me.
If,
But you got to remember the school is, nobody's there during the summer. So that was on a high,
Yeah.
it,
the most.
if we decide no water in the cooling system, period, then this other water metric we're talking about matters little, because then we're talking toilets, sinks, cleaning. If we're in a scenario where water can go into the cooling system under limited circumstances, then this number matters more probably of how much.
Would them wanting to fill it with water, would that be under an emergency situation, or we don't know any of that yet?
Right.
Right.
10 gallons, 0 gallons, 100 gallons.
Well, basically how we have it written is that they could use water in a closed loop system up to 60,000 gallons a month.
Mhm.
And then, but we don't know any of that until we have a data center business proposal on what they're going to do. So, I mean, and I know exactly what Greg's getting at. We need to determine if we're going to allow water usage or not allow water usage in this closed loop system. I mean, that's what we're discussing here.
Yep.
So just to be clear, there's nothing in the ordinance where we're going to limit them for using household or employee bathroom, kitchen.
Right.
We're not limiting that. Is that correct? Okay.
Correct. Nobody's ever talked about that.
Well, I think that's why we put that $60,000 or 60,000 gallon limit on there. Just to make sure that they could, per month.
I'm in favor of no water.
We can always change it when they come to us with a plan proposal. I mean, if we set it, we can change it. That's what it comes for, right?
The way I would look at it is when we finish the ordinance, if we say 0 water for cooling, that basically means 0 water in the system. They can clean and do maintenance. The domestic use is allowed. So then, as I understand it, and what I want to be sure is that 0 water doesn't prevent them from using the term we've heard and discussed is corn-based glycol. To those systems, they would, if they're using that, they don't need to clean them out very regularly. I've seen 8, 10, 12 years. But something could happen. I mean, they could have to replace that. They would be there would be rules to how they would do that. It would have to be properly disposed of. That is governed by the state. Now, if they needed to use some water to clean, that would be considered domestic use. So I think we're limiting the potential companies that could come in if we said zero water. But if that's a really important thing to us, then I think we can put that in there, and they would have to use corn-based glycol or some other non-water cooling system.
No water for a long time.
Mhm.
So does anyone have objections to a zero water system? Right?
I mean,
What was
Is
all-
that something that they're gonna need to prime the system with water and then follow with glycol? I mean, is there, because you hear, I've read stuff where they have to fill with water first and then they dispose of that water to prime the systems, but is that an all water system or is that with just glycol they don't need to prime with water?
They usually have the glycol tubes are full of that product, and then there's a cooling tower. But the cooling tower is like a fountain, so basically recycles the water. So we'll need some to fill in the cooling tower, but it ain't that much. They'll have to dig it, haul it in if they wanted to.
So just the initial fill is when they'd use.
Yeah, they'd have to fill the cooling tower. Sure.
It's just like a boiler in your home. It is gonna use a minor amount of water, especially if you have a leak or it, just by the process of circulating it, it's gone. So I think zero is pretty strict, but we should be able to word it that it's only for maintenance,
I think the whole concept of,
not cooling, but maintenance of the cooling.
Right,
Right.
Would that sound all right?
yeah,
But zero operating water.
right.
Right.
yeah, I think the concept is that we don't want them using mass quantities of water, which is all the fear that people talk about. So if we can set a limit, if we have a 60,000 limit, then if they were doing any kind of cleaning or flushing or whatever they had to do, they would be limited, so they couldn't use a large amount of water. But perhaps we say corn-based glycol or some other non-water cooling system. You don't know what's going to be in the future.
Not until the company comes, and we have to address it at that time, and then we can in the CUP.
Right.
But with that wording, with that they're aware of it, that should be fine, I would
Right.
think.
So you got an
I
idea
think
how
so.
we would word that, Greg?
Yeah, you can present that to Soren to say, yeah, to come up with some language basically with that narrow exception for cleaning maintenance. How we box it in so they can't get around it and
Right.
yeah.
Basically,
Okay.
it's still zero use for cooling.
Yeah. But it,
But we gotta
Yep.
go
Okay.
on a little bit of maintenance.
okay, all right, thank you. Kind of the next, the word karst came up multiple times, kind of in the context of, what do we require, if anything, about them exploring, mapping, identifying what karst features could be on the site. We have not done anything to that effect in the ordinance. So I guess that's a discussion point here is, do people want to, feel we need to, and if so, how?
That's probably gonna be addressed at the engineering.
We talked with Soren about that. We would assume anybody putting that kind of investment in a building would automatically be doing some of that work themselves to make sure they're putting it on a stable site. One thing we talked about was maybe adding it to the ordinance to say, we want copies of the site assessment as part of their application. Why not? I guess if they're doing it anyway.
It should be.
So now we do have well protection plan. So that covers any, so that there's no drilling they can do. And then obviously, I'm not sure if it's the DNR, but the retention pond for any water runoff. If you have a large building, you have a roof, a parking lot, that water's going to run off. that cannot run into the neighboring property. They have to have a containment pond for that, correct? And the state
Yeah,
regulates that?
I'm not sure if the state governs that on every case or if that's just certain developments, but
No, I believe it's on every.
okay. That's something we could explore too. If it's not covered, we could.
It's a permit. General contractor has to apply for.
The developer's to apply. I agree with getting a copy of the.
Yeah.
The plan or whatever they're looking at there.
Well,
Okay.
we should state if the state doesn't, if Minnesota doesn't control or restrict the water runoff, stormwater,
Okay.
then we will.
Okay.
The state does. The MPC will make the developer file for a permit.
Yeah.
And they will follow up if they don't.
I know every development we've done needs a pond recently. Even the school has a little dry pond next to their parking lot. So this would definitely be needed.
And kind of a similar point, we've talked in this group about how, they can't drill their own well, right? Everybody kind of understands that to be the case. We will need to tighten up our language in the other part of our zoning code about that, because it does say thou shalt not drill your own well for residential uses, but there's some gray area about other uses. So yeah, that would be another simultaneous improvement we should make in our zoning ordinance when we pass this. So just sharing that with everybody so we all keep that on our radar to button that down.
Others, but I think we should put it in this one too. Doesn't hurt to have it twice, right?
Well, we want it to apply to all town,
Sure.
right? Yeah.
Yeah,
So
we do.
we just
Yeah.
update that other section. Okay. Some comments related to the study. Let's see, here's a theme was require consideration of the entire project and potential future phasing. And so that's been a concern that's come out is, what happens if they come in and say, we're doing this size building and 2 years later, they say, surprise, we're here to expand. Common concern, but the way we have a control on that, and we discussed this with Soren, is when we issue our conditional use permit, it's going to be for that specific building size at that time and whatever accessories are associated with it. So if they want to make it bigger, they got to come back and either get their permit amended or get a whole new conditional use permit. So I guess that is one protection we have so that we don't accidentally leave the door wide open in regards to the phasing part.
I want to step back to the karst just for a second
sure.
so that does anybody have a concern with karst other than, basically, to my knowledge, the damage to karst is water, groundwater, stormwater. The topography is changed because you have a building and a parking lot. And we're going to contain that so that it has no effect on the karst. Does anybody think that's not correct? Okay.
Next, and again, yeah, if other similar things come to mind as we're talking about these, speak up. But another theme was clarify who selects and pays for the testing that's required on some of these different things, the noise testing, giving us the reports that we're asking for. And when we talked to Soren about that, he reminded us that because some of these things that they have to give us are requirement of application, that is implied that they pay to produce it. And so we don't have it written in here in clear language saying thou shalt pay for X, Y, Z on those types of reports and information that we're asking for. So we could go the extra mile and spell it out in more detail if we want to, but that was kind of his opinion of why it's not there. Is it's implied that if we're asking them to produce it, they're going to have to pay for it. There's no reason they would expect us to pay for that. Does that make sense? If there's ongoing monitoring, then we may need to tune in a little bit more as to who pays for that and have some language in there about making sure that burden's on them. So we're not stuck babysitting certain things. So keep that in the back of your mind too. Again, I'm looking for themes, not every individual comment. Noise is another consistent theme that's still coming up with questions. And so you heard Soren speak last time about how the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency has certain sound thresholds that they apply to all commercial industrial statewide. And so, we, back this last winter, had a lot of debate about what's the right decibel threshold, only to learn it was all for nothing because the state governs that. So we're not directly able to specify a certain decibel level, whether it's at the property line or elsewhere, according to the fact that state of Minnesota occupies that field. So the only way, as I've learned it, that we can really control sound is through kind of ancillary methods like the berming. And so we have reference in our ordinance that we may require berms, fences, depending upon the proposal. But it seems like the berming or some sort of obstruction, in the cities, they got walls along the freeways for that reason, things like that, they're one lever we have. But how strong of a lever that is kind of every person's opinion. Setbacks, Soren commented, aren't as helpful for noise because noise travels. And so, pushing something further and further off the road is a problem. So a lot of questions came up from the comments about, can we put a threshold on it, a lower threshold on it, or do more to restrict that? And that appears really clear. State law, there's a statute that specifically says local governments cannot do that. That's what he's relying on. Monitoring noise is another component to all of that. And so there were comments about making sure that we're not on the hook for monitoring or paying for the cost of that, or actually doing the monitoring so it doesn't just get set and forgotten about. And so this may be a discussion point of how far do we want to go with what we require. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency sets the standards, but they don't have a Minnesota Pollution Control Agency police force, to come down and address these. It's up to us ultimately to enforce these. And so it could look like an annual check, a quarterly check. We talked about how with liquor licenses, we have an annual check at least, right? Somebody goes in. So we could treat it similar to that if we wanted to. We would just need to specify what frequency, what does it look like? Is it a third party? Because we probably don't want to be doing it. And if it is a third party, specify they're paying for it. So those are considerations, at least again, if we wanted to hit on some of those comments and concerns from the public.
I definitely like the third party.
I thought that's what we talked about.
I thought we
but
did.
it was in the
And
ordinance.
it may have been discussed and just never fully got incorporated as he was drafting. So
I'm wondering if in the CUP, once we pick a contractor, or My Energy picks a contractor, and they know how big the building is, what equipment's in there, how noisy that equipment is. The engineer, we should be able to get a printout of how loud it is all the way out to the surrounding area on what decibels that is. And I know they can do that because, civil defense director, I got a printout on the town on how many decibels the siren would go out. And is there a way we can word that in the CUP so we could reject that CUP if that noise level is going to be too high?
yeah, he added some language about noise annual reporting after our comments from last time, but you're saying make more clear that we're getting a noise report basically as part of the application materials. I don't know if that's clearly specified, but we can make sure it is.
Well, we can reject the CUP if.
Yeah, if it's
if it
higher than the
isn't-
state standard.
Right.
So you're calling it acoustical.
And actually, we'd know what that decibel is. And if it's too much, we can
Mhm,
still reject it.
right.
But if it isn't anything, then we should be fine.
So that's on the front end. We can make sure that that's part of the application materials, is they're giving us a site map and acoustical study map. On the ongoing basis, we like the idea of third-party testing for noise. I'm sure everybody likes the idea of making them pay for it, right? What frequency?
Doesn't the state set that?
I don't think not how often you have to check it once it's gone. They're just,
So you're asking frequency of testing.
yeah, what frequency, sorry, not frequency of noise, yeah. Time frequency, yeah, yes. Annual, semi-annual, quarterly.
I would say at least semi-annually.
Yeah, at least semi or quarterly for me.
Same here.
I'd say quarterly.
Quarterly shouldn't be a problem.
Okay. All right, great.
I would assume.
There were,
Should we choose the third party then, so they're not choosing their best?
yeah, good question.
Companies that,
Kelsey, I can't hear you. What did you say?
do we choose the third party? Do they choose the third, who chooses the third party that's doing that testing?
It says up here, he
Okay.
did make that adjustment. So it's D, the applicant shall complete an annual noise study conducted by a third-party engineer.
But who's
Oh,
that?
but
It
it's
probably
just-
has to be agreed upon, third party.
Agreed upon third-party engineer.
We could put that meets city approval.
Yeah.
Isn't that a nice
Yeah,
little
agreed
thing to
upon.
have, so that they can't bring in somebody that we're not approving?
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Okay.
No, not the best.
All right, great. There were comments about changing language to state that deviations may be approved through a variance, instead to language that prevents deviations from exceeding established standards. So not 100% clear on the context there, but I guess the note I made and just wanted to share is even though we set these rules, so an applicant could always come and say, I want a variance. You know, we deal with those around town all the time. I want a special exception from this rule in particular. So we can't control them asking. We can certainly deny them if we don't like what they're asking or want to give leeway, or can't if there's no legal grounds for it. So ultimately what we're setting is the standards we want to see, and we can stick to them as long as we have the interest in doing so. Next, there is a kind of a theme and group of questions about kind of the traditional zoning setbacks and heights and sizes. And so there was a comment about increasing the minimum lot area. I think right now the draft ordinance talks about, is it 5 acres being the minimum size for a 100,000 square foot building?
Yes.
And so we're saying you can't put a 100,000 square foot building on a 2-acre lot. In other words, it barely fit, or or wouldn't fit
No.
2.5 acre lot. Yeah. So their comment is urging that we do something bigger than that to basically keep the density lower. So that would be a discussion point, I guess. And I guess along those lines too, the other ones about height. There are a lot of comments about height. Right now, the draft ordinance says 60 feet. And I think everybody knows we didn't really talk about that this last winter. That was just when Soren did the draft. I think he picked a number that he's used to seeing. So, but that's totally variable. We can do whatever we want with that.
I did some measuring of buildings. Eco's back building is 40 feet, 40-foot building. And I think 60 foot is way too high, but I think we should go to 40. Not that that would be covered then.
Did we look at our ordinance earlier? And our ordinance says 50 right now, right?
Right now for commercial and agricultural, the exception is silos, are both listed at 50 feet, and industrial has no limit or no height restriction that's written into the current ordinance. So from a consistency standpoint, 50 would align unless.
So we don't have a problem. This ordinance can be more restrictive
Right.
because it's just the technology park. So
Yep.
we can lower that to 40.
Yes.
I don't have a problem with 40. I want to see at least a minimum of letting them allow a 30-foot sidewalk, because if somebody comes in and say down the road, that place closes or whatever, a car dealership, a truck dealership, somebody comes in, wants to put in an overhead hoist, they need the room.
Mhm.
And I just know that from where I work, but 40 is fine.
And then further question on that, when we measure 40, is it just to the roof, or does it include things sitting on top of the roof,
That's a good question.
like HVAC?
Yeah, so one thing I've read on that with cooling fans make some noise. If they're on the roof, then if you want a company that's coming in, you say, we want that to be as quiet as possible. They say, okay, we got to put a shroud on, and they go with wind. Forget the exact name, but it's also any exhaust fans they have on the roof. When you have strong winds coming along, that can totally overcome an exhaust fan. So they put wind shrouds on it that they do two things. They direct noise straight up in the air so that the surrounding area doesn't hear it. And the other thing is it keeps it gives room for sound baffles also, baffling within the shroud. So I don't know, maybe the 40 feet total is enough to have a 35-foot building and a 5-foot shroud.
I think 40 is enough on the top.
Okay.
With everything going on.
All inclusive.
10 feet from the base, if your roof was a flat roof and you were at 30-foot sidewalk, 10 feet gives them quite a bit of room to put some hardware up there. That's my thought.
Yeah. It wouldn't preclude them from having an antenna.
Yeah,
a
we could
dish.
make exceptions for those things if we want to. Yeah. If we need to. You could just draft it the way you want it, and then if a compelling applicant comes along and there's a couple of those things like that need to be fine-tuned, you can amend the ordinance like Soren said last time too. But
The tough part, I think some people think, well, what's coming in, and we don't know. We have to finish the ordinance. Then they look at the rules we have established, and then companies will either look at it and say, we can't do what we want because you're too restrictive, and they don't offer and we don't talk about it. If they're can match our requirements here, then they have to come in and complete a conditional use permit where we can put additional restrictions on based on what they tell us. If they can put quiet equipment in there and that low frequency noise, so it's not a problem, then it's like, well, you don't have to build a berm because there's no noise for the berm to stop. If there's noise, then they have to do more mitigations. So I just want to let people know that this is a first step. This isn't saying yes to a data center. It's not saying no to a data center. It's saying we're going to look at them potentially to see what they have to offer and if they can meet our requirements.
all right, that's
I would
good.
say 40 feet to the top of everything.
Okay.
That was,
Okay.
the current ordinance says it shall be inclusive of all that rooftop accessory stuff. So if you change it to 40, it includes all of that.
Great. The second part of that was that area, or the density requirement of 5 acres versus something different.
I don't quite understand that. So we have 60 acres. They have 60 acres, right? So what does that mean when you
It's-
say 5 acres?
So the current, how to find it now? The current rule says minimum lot size, data centers over 100,000 square feet in gross floor area shall have a minimum lot area of 5 acres. And so some of these play against each other too, because we're talking in a separate one, we've got 500-foot setback.
I was going to say the
So-
setbacks will dictate some of that too.
Yeah, so realistically, maybe that is just inherently impossible to have anything 5 acres in size. I guess if you think of
You
it from a
probably-
setback angle.
Yeah, you probably couldn't build a 100,000 square foot building with setbacks on a
No,
5 acre lot.
you can't.
Right.
So that's where I'd like to, I don't understand why it's 500 feet from agricultural land.
Yep, there were some comments on that.
Because I mean, agriculture, I've got a behind behind me, they plant right up to my lot line.
Right.
There's no setbacks.
Yeah.
I mean, we need to have setbacks, but 500 feet from the front to the, in the back and each side shrinks that property down to where we don't have any room for the retainage ponds, any berms that are needed, parking lot. Is that, all that has to be within that 500 foot? That 500 foot?
I don't,
is
the
excessive.
500 is for the building.
Yeah, and we could craft it that way to make clear that the berms are fine outside, for example. So that doesn't have to be a barrier to having that sort of a setback necessarily.
You really don't want to, I mean, and that, the way that looks right now too, there is a possibility of extra land they would give to us for other development.
Part of the 60 you're speaking.
Right. And that would, if them setbacks are like that, that would then go away.
Yeah, I guess the real question is, if you were a neighbor, how much distance would you want from this? Whether you're living there, have a business there, farming.
Well, I think it should be different if it's living or a field.
Well, I have, I think I know where you're coming from. So what I think is, we're talking about a 60 acre, currently a 60 acre piece that's annexed into the city, and that, or this ordinance is going to apply to that as a technology park. If it's a 500-foot setback for building structures from residential, and I don't see the point of ag either, but if ag is in there, so be it. But it shouldn't be for commercial or other industrial, because then you would just limit, you could put one data center in the middle of this property and then the rest of it's grass, and or a retainage pond, maybe a solar field, whatever. But it would restrict you from putting like some commercial properties along the frontage road, along the road here. So if we feel the need for 500-foot setback, and people are opposed to having it for ag also, or not including ag, I guess I'd be okay with that. It can be ag and residential. Of course, there's no residential within 1,000 feet, so we're fine on that. But
Well, right now, the industrial lot
They wouldn't
setbacks
be-
are totally different than that.
a residential wouldn't be restricted in what they could do. If there's a business and you want to build your house next to it, and
You're right, you
the
could.
setbacks don't affect it, then you can do that if you want. But you can't say, I want to build a house next to Hiko. They got to move their building.
You're right. Somebody could come build a house on their parcel next door, wherever they wanted. The argument I've heard made is it make it less likely that anybody would ever do a housing subdivision if the building's closer to the property line? That's the argument for larger setbacks, is to give the people who are neighbors the freedom and full value of their property to still be able to farm it if they want, sell it for housing development if they want, without being burdened by what's next door.
Well, their other neighbors can build hug buildings, barns, houses. Their other neighbors can do that also.
1,000 feet from residents. So there's, county has rules on setbacks for that, for example.
Yep.
Front and back is 30 feet, side yards are 20 feet in the industrial park right now. Side yards. I get that. But that's right now our standing ordinance. I mean, changing 20 and 30 feet to 100 feet.
100 or even 200, then they could still put a.
Absolutely. It's a 60 acre lot. Absolutely, they could. And I mean, but if we take it away from the rest of the going to that. And if it comes up in the future, I mean,
You don't have to change your existing.
Yeah, this is only
setbacks.
going to apply to the
Correct, yep.
technology part. Yep.
Curious.
that's what I call
I think 500 is too much. I'm
Way too
sure with 200.
Or 250, but, That's a-
250.
I mean, I'm good with 100.
Go on a 60-acre field, measure 500 feet off all four sides and see what you end up with.
I guess one consideration is what is the 500, what are you trying to accomplish with 500 feet? You're still going to see it. But
excuse me.
Well, I would think you're trying to protect the ag land in the event of a waste spill from their non-aqueous cooling system, perhaps.
Ag land has no setback, thing go right to their boundary line.
Bring your line to here.
So then that means we would want to regulate ag land and say you gotta have setbacks too?
No.
Well, they're the ones planted up to the lot line.
I don't know. 3.
Right.
Right, so they got a choice, they don't have to plant up to that lot line.
300.
Yeah, but if there's a hazardous waste spill that takes out some of their
Doesn't have-
land, then
This
they're
doesn't have any
losing.
hazardous waste as of right now.
Ethylene glycol can be classified as a
So can
hazardous
milk,
waste.
so can milk.
Yes, but they're not going to cool the system with milk. I doubt.
Maybe that's the answer.
If it might be.
Sell more milk.
And we.
On that lot, 500 feet off each end, that gives it 250 feet.
Wow.
on the width.
Mhm.
Side, so
And 300
Three.
gives it.
Usually average.
I got the same thing.
300 gives it 650.
Yep, 654. 654 at one end, 596 on the other.
So
Do we have front
So, I
difference
mean,
on the
they
sides?
still have
Yes.
to have the retaining ponds
Yep.
and roads and parking lots. So it's gonna get too condensed
All that
otherwise.
setback, is
No.
that just? I think we're just talking building, road and all that.
You can decide that too.
Structures.
I mean, the road,
Right?
inherently you need a road to get in, so that, yeah, we don't apply setback to the road.
Okay, parking.
Yeah, it doesn't, so the ordinance draft setback requirements, all data centers and accessory uses or structures other than transmission and distribution power lines, pipelines delivering electricity or natural gas to the property and ingress and egress for road and rail traffic shall be located, and that's where it goes into setback.
it does say structures too, so a retainage pond, you need a setback from a retainage pond because that's stopping whatever's coming. If there's any water or chemical visiting the building, it would be that many feet from the property line.
You asked if it can be different on the front. The answer is yes. We
Yep.
can choose
I heard
different.
you. Thank you.
Yep. So the current draft says at least 300 feet, in all cases. But there's a tighter restriction, at least 500 feet from residential, commercial, or agricultural. So that's what we're discussing, I guess, is that good as written, or if not, how to change that. People have thrown out different numbers. We can always circle back to this later, knowing too, this is the final approval tonight either. But I don't want to spend all of our time, I guess, debating this if folks feel willing to move on.
It'd be nice to get, once our ordinance is completed, it would be nice to get a company or two proposing potential data centers. They're capped at the 55 megawatt, so I'm imagining that would put some sort of cap on the size building that they would need if they were going to use that whole amount. And just never heard that number. So is a 250-foot wide building much longer? Is that big enough for a 50 megawatt?
I don't know. That's one thing that would have to be addressed once the company would be, if a company's picked or.
Because
I mean, a lot of different variables here that have to happen in engineering.
I mean, if we could have a 400-foot setback and a 40 employee data center, I would prefer that to a 500-foot setback and a 5 employee data center. So I'm
Right.
500 is very arbitrary. We've talked about 300, talked about 500. Maybe we just say 400. It's 100 feet.
Well, I think the question is do we want to move commercial and ag to the 300-foot setback? I really think that's a looming question. And probably more the question is do we want to move agriculture? to
Right.
that
I don't think
versus
commercial matters, but what that setback is. Because no one's going to build there unless they want to. I'd like to propose 400-foot setback for ag. And pick a number for commercial and commercial and industrial.
400 for residential as well.
We can say for residential because they're not there. Yeah. Like I said, that only restricts buildings in this technology park. It doesn't say somebody can't do something on their property. It just says what can't be done on this technology park.
Recap, right? The proposal on the table is we got a 300 minimum in all cases, but a special rule for ag, 400 feet, special rule for residential, 500 feet. So if somebody applied, we'd be looking at what the surrounding zoning classifications are and then measuring accordingly from the property lines. Is that what people understand?
Yes.
Okay. Good enough for now to move on, I guess. Kind of another theme, parking and emergency access came up a little bit. We talked to Soren about how does a person address that? And this is probably lower level concern so that he thought a conditional use permit would be your perfect time going through the permit process to throw this to the fire chief, throw this to the police chief, the plan to make sure that they would be satisfied that it would accommodate whatever was needed from their perspective. And if it didn't, you'd use your authority to say, well, one of the conditions of approving this is you got to change it to make sure it's got a turnaround or whatever, might be needed. So, water usage standards, there were quite a few comments again about the kind of theme of how do we monitor water. We talked about water usage earlier on in the meeting, and I think it's been discussed in the past too about we as a city, since we're going to restrict them to taking our water for what they do use, we'll have a meter on there to be able to monitor that ourselves. I think we've talked about and discussed. So I don't know if that, from my opinion or Soren's perspective, needed any further attention in the ordinance. We just talked about the setbacks. Annual reporting, there were some comments about a a really basic one, a good one about setting a deadline for that. So we made note to put in the ordinance a deadline if anybody has an opinion, but I'd figure just probably once a date, February 15th or 28th of every year, just expect it to come in by that deadline would be the simplest probably. Talked about sound reporting, fees, late fees. So this is a good topic. We haven't discussed it really on the nitty gritty of what happens if they violate a rule. And so when Alyssa and Chris and I talked to Soren this afternoon, kicking out ideas of how do we address that, I would say Soren's main takeaway, his theme was usually don't worry too much about the fines, because if they're not ultimately not doing something that you're requiring them to do, your hammer is just to take the CUP away from them, shut them down. So that would be his position is if they aren't giving us their annual report every year like they're required to do, we send them a note. You forgot to do this, and you probably expect it pretty quick because they have a vested interest in staying operable with their permit. So that was kind of the main theme I took from his comments. We can still choose, if we want to set fines for specific things. There's debate over strategy with that. Will it work as a good carrot and incentive for them to do things on time? Or is it just going to be interpreted more like a license to violate as long as you pay the fine? I know that's been a concern some folks have communicated and had. I guess it's up for discussion of whether we want to do something specific. There is one reference in our current draft about a fee is set according to the fee schedule. And so we either leave that in there and set a fee for it, or we adjust it if we want it somehow different.
If you use it as where you pull their CUP, you say, you got 15 days, you got 30 days.
Yep, that was another comment is
And
what's
then
the
if that's
timeline?
plug on 'em.
So, yeah, and that was another comment was, well, we forgot to set a timeline basically. Do they get 60 days to correct the violation? Is it 30 days or is it something longer? And when we questioned Soren on that, his recommendation was not to commit yourself to a certain time period because different violations are going to cause for different responses. Something might be correctable immediately and you would expect a 7-day fix. Sometimes it might be a longer term thing where you'd be giving them months, so that was his guidance too, is not to commit ourselves to a specific timeline. But again, we can do whatever we want if we want to button some things down.
So if I'm understanding that right, what he's saying is that we would have the city come back and just, hey, they're violating this part of the ordinance. What's that? How many days we're going to get them to fix that violation? If they don't do it in that set time, then we yank their conditional use permit.
Yes. If they don't comply, that's when you suit up, go to court, say, Judge, we need an injunction shutting them down because they didn't listen to us after we took their permit away for violating this part. So that's why the permit will be critically important. We're spending all the time with the ordinance, which is important in its own right, but this isn't the end of the road. That permit's going to be what we live and breathe by when we say, are you doing a good job or not? And there, along those lines, ties into this, there is missing from the ordinance language saying if we have to fight them on a violation that they pay our attorney's fees. And Soren's going to add that. That's a good provision to have in here. So I'll get that. Any thoughts on how we approach fines, deadlines, things of that nature, enforcement?
So I had one question on that. So we have the CUP, the conditional use permit, and we can pull that if they're in violation. And then but if you put a fine on, then it's assumption that they can pay the fine and not have it pulled. But I'm thinking if you can pull it, you can pull it, whether there's a fine or not, right? So couldn't we have a fine?
Yeah, I was saying the fine can give some people the perception that they can pay to play, so to speak. So that's we don't have to.
That could be a dangerous slippery road.
So it's just strategy. I don't know if it's better to live in a world where we don't have fines. We just say you follow the rules or you don't, black or white. To the extent we can make the rules black or white.
I like you don't follow the rules, you pay the fine and you fix it, or we pull the permit.
Yep.
So you do both.
So we
It's
yeah
not
we can focus
Pay
one
the
on-
fine, and we're not doing that. You pay the fine and it's pulled until you correct it.
If you still don't have it done in X amount of days, the permit's pulled.
So then we just need to figure out what the fines would
Can you make
be.
Can you make that stick where they're gonna be able to do both?
Yeah, you can craft
Yeah,
it that way.
I think you can. It's just, if you do the fine, you give them more time, is the way I look at it, to fix the problem, and the problem continues longer than if you do the other.
Oh, no, I meant, if you don't have a fine, right, you're just gonna pull the permit. So I'm saying that's what we're doing. We're just gonna pull the permit, but we're gonna fine them also.
So what's,
So they're not
Okay,
gonna,
I
they're
got
gonna pay the fine, and once they correct their thing, then we reissue the permit.
if they've got a problem and we give them 30 days to fix it? The
But there's a
fine
fine
was
assessed.
$10,000, they pay the 10 grand and they fix it, and if they don't fix it, we pull it up.
But then is there an X amount of
No.
times on how many times they can do that? Because if they just got money, they're gonna keep throwing, can they
He's-
keep violating the
I'm
same fine?
saying,
He's pulling the
I'm
cup.
saying we're pulling the plug.
You're gonna yank the
That's
cup.
what he's
We're
saying.
pulling the permit immediately, and there's a fine.
I don't know if we'd be able to, you always need some sort of warning
Yeah.
before pulling the permit. Because it's a vested property right, basically. So due
Sure.
process requires.
You would still give them that time to
Yeah.
fix it, whatever
Okay.
we determine,
Yeah.
if you're pulling their conditional use permit. You give them notice
Yeah.
that you're in violation.
They get to continue to run.
Here's your time frame to fix it.
Yeah.
Here's your fine, and if you don't fix it in that X amount of days, then we're pulling your pull.
I like that.
Okay, so then we would need to craft a fine schedule for what things trigger what. And maybe it's simple, maybe it's just one fine for any type of violation, but that would be something, I don't know if we'll be able to figure out tonight, but would be part of this project if we're going to go down that road. And I can see what ideas Soren would have too, since he didn't obviously put that in there. He was just referencing, because most cities have a fee schedule, which we do for other fines. But
The
that's
fine's over like a
inadequate.
noise ordinance, and they gotta bring someone out there to check the noise level. I mean, we should consider that the cost of that is either doubling and tripling on the fine or quadrupling.
Right. A one size fits all fine might not be appropriate for the different things that,
Absolutely not.
and we'll never think of all up front.
No, they won't be able to.
Yeah.
We can base it off of what it's gonna cost for them to. I don't know what the problem is. Noise levels, water usage.
Okay. Well, I'll just take that general feedback and
Okay.
see what he has.
But I'm okay with pulling too.
Okay.
I think fines are good.
Yeah, and I mean, we talk about it as if it's easy. Make no mistake,
It's not.
you're fixing yourself for a fight.
Yep.
But that's why we want the table set so that there isn't going to be a lot of controversy. We want it as good as we can up front if we're going to move forward.
Well, and I think the other part of that is that language that says if there's attorney's fees, you're paying them, not us. You know,
Yep. All right, what's next? Oh, there were comments about, we're requiring them to do an annual report of the various things, electricity use, water use, noise. And so somebody commented about making sure those are basically verified reports from others, not necessarily them self-reporting. So we went through the list, a couple of them, the first couple, yeah, I can turn to the page. Page is this, oh, it's section 7, which would be, it doesn't have page numbers, but section 7 of the ordinance. The first two probably fall on my energy slab to measure and share. So annual electricity consumption, peak electricity demand levels. So when they give us an annual report, that's what we would expect. And we can detail that in more detail if we want, but inherently, I think that's where those would come from. The generator runtime, I don't think there is any way to party reporting for that. That is, they're going to be the ones that know that information. So we're going to be counting on them to share that.
I thought I read that Minnesota MPC has rules on how long generators can run. That
They might have caps or maximums, I don't know, but this is just saying them telling us how much they ran it for the year, so we can make sure they're within our ordinance thresholds.
All those generators have an hour meter.
Mhm. Right, so we're counting on them to,
Who's to say we can't send one of our employees out there once a year on a certain date, and read the hour meter, and he does it every year on that date.
if we want to do that, we have to build it in the ordinance, but we could. It's a form of inspection.
If you want to keep it to that 100, there is an hour meter on them, and you can tell what they're tampered with.
I think they have reporting on that to the state because they're capped at that 100 for testing.
Testing, yep.
So there might be something we need to check into too.
Yeah. Right. The next one, and water consumption. We concluded we would probably know that number to be able to check what they tell us. Emissions inventory. That was related to generators. Do you remember, Alyssa, what he said about that? I guess I don't recall dwelling on that one much. And then he added to the list that annual report each year on this noise. And so that, I think, dovetails on what we were just talking about with quarterly third-party testing. So that would be done by a third party if we follow, we were leaning towards their other rules. So,
I would guess that your emissions is gonna be run or controlled by the MPCA or because all our emissions are controlled on ag equipment. They're tier 4, excuse me, they're tier 4B right now. They're going to tier 4-5 or tier 5. Emissions on the product that we're moving is the emissions coming out of this. The tractors and combines today is cleaner than the air that we're sitting in this room breathing. Believe it or not.
Yeah.
EPA will control that.
yeah.
We can put something in there, but EPA will control it.
Yeah, they'll oversee it. We just want to know what the information is to report. So we're trusting the owner to provide that in most cases, unless we want to go so far to
Make sure that
do
they're
something
mission
themselves. Yeah.
Is that something that at some point, if we don't feel that they're being truthful with us on those, we also include the third-party testing of the emissions?
Discretion.
So I would put something in there to the effect of being emission compliant. Because that keeps them from altering any emissions on the engine.
Okay.
And then you'd have to have somebody test it.
So. I mean, you don't have to, but it doesn't hurt to say. So being emission compliant with
Environmental Protection Agency.
with the right, if we want to go inspect ourselves, like the hour meter, and things like that, just to double check. We wouldn't have to do it, but if we ever questioned it,
Correct.
we could. Okay. All right. Good. Other themes, there are questions about the community benefits agreement that came up. About changing things like instead of it, right now it says may require community benefits agreement, changing it to say shall require, will require. Also talking about in more detail about getting the developer to cover our costs. And so things like having an escrow account, and Katrina talked about this, other communities doing this, where they make the developer put a pile of money up to cover our engineering fees for engineers reviewing plans for us, planner fees if ever we need a planner, attorney's fees, for example. And so that stuff isn't baked into this draft ordinance. Again, we could add it if we wanted to, but Soren's opinion was we can require that as part of the application process, as part of the going through the motions to get them
CUP.
yeah, through the conditional use permit. So a few of these things we're talking about are we can put them in if we want to, but we don't necessarily have to. We're not closing the door on doing these things if they're not in there. Yeah, and then there were ideas, I guess, too, about what to ask for, what to do with the money. You guys hopefully read the comments. I don't know if people have thoughts on that stuff or want to go into that, but about ultimately how we, beyond just the regular property taxes, benefit from this. I guess that's the theme of the community benefits agreement.
Yeah, I think that's, I've had a lot of thought about that. And being the mayor and on city council, the property taxes come in, the different income, the LGA comes in, and the council decides how to spend those funds. Rather than trying to tell some company, oh, we want you to give a bucket of money here, and there. Like, let's say to the fire department or to the ambulance, they can always use more money, but really if our ambulance fund got $1 million, they'd probably put it in a CD and use the interest for something. But it seems to me it'd be better to, those are property taxes, that does come under the city purview. The council decides how to do that. And then whether it's the franchise, electrical franchise fee or some other fee structure, I think that's where I would see the kind of negotiation with the company going. And then you give the city a bucket of money and the different departments can come and request. We need money for this. We'd like to do that. And then the city has the funds to distribute as they see best. That's where I see the community benefits. I don't know what other people think about community benefits. It seems like the ordinance is kind of the wrong place to say that because that's going to be a given. If a data center wants to come into Harmony, there's going to have to be really good community benefits.
Well, I think that's a negotiation piece for the CUP, because you can't put a number on it necessarily in the ordinance to say, okay, we want you to donate this much community benefit. It's tough to put a number on that. You might shoot yourself in the foot because you go too low or you go too high.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Covering a few, there's a little bit more. So I don't know. We're doing okay on time. We'll get through this and then.
So what I just want to go back to that. So how do we want to describe that in the ordinance?
Well, the ordinance is really vague in general. So right now with how that section's written.
Okay.
And some would see that as positive. Like Jesse said, maybe that means you just, deal with it when there is an application and work that in that way. But if you guys want to get more specific, we can try that. Steve made a point, I guess I would just underscore, is that from what I've learned and seen, our best way to reap benefits out of something like this would be through selling electricity, whatever that agreement is. If it's not us directly, whatever that agreement is, because that is a normal, legally defined process. Community benefits agreements, kind of a new thing, so not as tried and tested. So if we want to stay safe in the safe lane, that's where our community could see, in my opinion, the biggest cash, benefit beyond just the property taxes.
It's still going to be negotiated. So
Yeah, and franchise fee basically negotiate the cup, right?
Not in the cup with the utility provider. Yep.
The community benefits agreement portion just states the city may require an applicant for a conditional use permit to enter into a community benefit agreement intended to offset the impacts and costs of the data center development. So it's kind of may do that. It's kind of a loose.
Right. And there's some things that are easy and direct, if the street needs to be improved or utilities need to be extended, those are the easy, normal ones to throw in and say, all right, we'll approve this, but not at everybody else's cost. You got to front the cost for these things up front. So yes, that would be able to be thrown in as a condition. We'll approve you, but you got to carry your own weight.
If you're thinking about this, like going forward, council changes, that kind of stuff changes, does it hurt anything to say shall negotiate something so that you're kind of setting the precedence if it wasn't these people sitting here who are saying, yeah, we're going to negotiate benefits or we're not doing it, to say like, make it clear, we would expect you to negotiate benefits for the community if you're going to take on this project.
Yeah, and I'd add on to that, I'd go back to Greg, because I mentioned it at the meeting and then I saw it in a number of the comments that a lot of people worry about that word shall. And I think Soren just said, well, we use shall all the time.
Yeah.
Shall and must are kind of interchangeable.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I like
Most
will-
lawyers prefer the
will
word
or
shall
must.
over
Yes.
must.
Yes.
And
May.
it isn't already defined in our ordinance, that shall equals must. So they're equated in our ordinance
Okay.
As a mandatory command. So,
Okay.
yep. So yeah, just as a drafting, I always use shall instead of will or must, because
Okay.
in the legal world, that's the key indicator that There's no options.
Okay, good.
You're looking to change the word may there.
Yeah.
That's my question. Does that,
And
from community standpoint, does that? Is that?
I mean, that, the other thing that could happen is the council coming in, or a different council could change that to take it all out or change it back to May too. So either way, it doesn't, you know,
I do.
it could be.
But if it is in the ordinance, then it takes an ordinance change. to
Correct.
change
It does.
So it's a little higher bar than just the council willy-nilly not doing it.
Public hearing.
Right.
And just community member feel good situation might be beneficial.
So people, yeah, I don't see any harm in changing it. So, because there's got to be something there that they're going to have to pay for it.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay. All right. Other themes as we're getting closer to the end of the list. Somebody suggested there's a theme about tightening the language defining when a CUP holder is considered default. Soren did list some of the basic generic things like failure to comply with the conditions of the permit. That's what I've talked about earlier. So if we set a condition and they don't meet it, that would be a default. But we did think, well, we should add the general old follow state and federal law. So that if they screw up some upper level, that we can also say, yep, that's game over for our perspective too, for example.
From the permit side.
Yes. revoking
Rather
the-
than waiting for federal to go through
Right.
their process, we
Right.
can just do it.
Yep. So that would give us another lever there to add to the list that's already there. So, and if you think of others, we can add them in too. But we talked about violations and penalties, enforcement actions. Talked about how he'll add that paragraph about them being responsible for attorney's fees if there is an enforcement action. Permit decommissioning. There were some comments about decommissioning, and we did talk about that earlier. I think this past winter, we were talking about that in detail and ultimately concluded at our last meeting that it's maybe outside of our scope to govern decommissioning in a context like this where it's privately owned land. The common instance where you do see it come up, just for everybody's benefit, is like if you're a farmer and lease your land for solar panels and you still own that land, and someday when they're done, you want to make sure you can farm it again, then absolutely you need to make sure there's a way to decommission and get that stuff off. We're in a little different situation. We're the public zoning authority, but we don't own that land. We won't own that land. We would expect that a valuable building would be put to some other use. Is kind of the theory there. So if we change our mind and want to do something with decommissioning, we still can, but right now it's not in the draft for those reasons.
We talked about that when it was the Bitcoin and Connexes, it wasn't building.
Right. It would seem to matter more in that context, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they could just walk away from that, but they're not gonna walk away from a nice building. For whoever they're financing with.
Right. Okay.
Well, if the city will get it back in taxes, then we'll sell it.
Getting
Just
to the
realistic.
getting to the very end, some comments on the transparency part. Just a theme that came out from a few comments was that all fine and dandy basically to say we're not going to sign any non-disclosures, but there is an exception written at the end that says except as required by law for the protection of protected proprietary or trade secret information. And the comments were kind of to the effect of, well, why would we be in the game on proprietary and trade secret information since we're not the ones selling the land or soliciting the developer? So the comments were to the kind of the extent of scratch that last part. It should just be a end stop, right after that first rule. So that was something that was spoken about.
So that's clear. We're saying we're not allowing ourselves to enter any NDAs with any data center companies
Right? No
or
exceptions.
anybody in the
If-
technology part.
We take that except out.
If we scratch that end of the sentence, then there's just no exceptions. It's just a period.
Yeah.
So that people are okay with that.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. All right. And then not necessarily grouped into sections, but just some other general comments I popped out that seemed worth discussing. There were comments or questions about, can we restrict ownership of this to domestic owner as opposed to foreign owner? And that gets off into shaky legal territory. In my opinion, I don't think we could discriminate based on where somebody's from. We kind of do that with farmland. Minnesota has a corporate farm rule, for example, that says you can't be a corporation and own farmland, but there's about 15 different exceptions, so that it never gets challenged. So anyway, that I didn't even talk to Soren about that. We could quiz him on it if people were interested in exploring that more, but that might be a tough one. We'd have to get his opinion ultimately. There were questions about clarifying the number of buildings and major components that could be developed on the site. And again, I think that circles back to we will be approving them for a certain plan when we give them the permit. And so we just need to structure that in a way that it's not a blank check, for adding an outbuilding here and there and all over the place.
And there are setbacks on structures too.
Yes.
Yeah, we should make a note of that to clarify. Yeah, it already does talk about
It says
everything
all
being within the
accessory
setbacks,
uses and structures.
except the utilities and the road. Yeah,
Yep.
yep. Address cumulative impacts and future expansions. Initial capacity cannot be circumvented through subsequent phases. Again, that I think ties back to the permit and what you permit them for and just being real clear on the size. And then there were a few comments about a community vote. Some people requested that. Could you do a formal vote and referendum that's binding? No. But can you do a community survey to get people's opinion? Sure. There's no rules against that. But you can't toss it to the community like California does on their, propositions every once in a while. What else? I think those hit the main things that were worth going through. Alyssa or Chris, did you think of anything else that you took away from our conversation earlier? And I should add, this is just a summary. So hopefully you read the comments in detail. And if you haven't, you still have time to. This is not a substitute. There are things that were commented that we didn't go over. So there might still be other things that we need to talk about. So I would say open the floor to any other things that we haven't addressed that people would still want to talk about, either from your own list or other people's lists.
Yes, I'll open that to the floor here. That means the members. Any other, either your own comments or comments that you read that you feel we should address? I would say, now we're going back to Soren with this again, fine tuning it. Is tonight a night to set a public hearing or not yet? Should we wait till we get that next one?
Yep. Depends on what you guys want to see unfold. Because the other question is, does this group get back together again, or is it bye-bye for this group and it just goes to planning and zoning next? So those are the next steps. We got to chart what happens next. But yes, we'll take our notes back to Soren, expect him to do a draft 5 and they'll circulate that. And then it'll have to go for review.
Rushing or anything, but any timeline on what it would take Soren to get this next draft.
Just as a courtesy, I would give them a couple weeks, get it in and turn it around. But
Really.
now that we're beyond the initial work, this will be a little more editing than he had after the last round. But
Yeah, and I would just like to say to everybody, the public, thank you for coming. And everybody on these boards, we've put a lot of time into this. We've met many times. We've had a lot of input from the public, and you can still input to anybody you see up here. You can talk to any of us. Well, I guess it's each individual's decision whether they speak to you. But for myself, I'm very open to anybody contacting me and with questions. We've gone through a lot here tonight, addressed concerns that people gave us. And I think if you still have concerns, let us know again, send them in. And I, for one, and I think everybody up here will read through them. So, and
Do we want to try to?
let's see. Yeah, the next.
Let's talk about if we want to meet again and go over the review of the
And-
draft ordinance as a group.
Just a quick review
Yeah.
of the draft, see what he's got and say whether yes or no, and send it to Soren.
we can have them track the changes so that we just can focus on the changes.
Right. If we give him 2 weeks roughly, that would be the 9th, which would be after our council meeting. It's up to the group. I mean, yeah, it would be planning and zoning would be October 7th. Well, it's depending upon how you want to do the public hearing. There's 2 ways to do that, but I think, Steve, we want to do it at a council meeting is the way I've understood you, the public hearing portion of it, correct? Or am I misspeaking?
Let's get to that point. How do you want to do public hearing?
The public hearing for the ordinance?
Yes.
Do you want to do that separate or do you want to do it at a council meeting?
You could make it a special council meeting, for example, if you didn't want to blur it together with your regular business.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Or couldn't we
I
do,
don't think.
I'm open for either because it's going to be, we're going to get a recommendation from zoning. A lot of times most times when we get recommendations from zoning, that's what we do. Sometimes we
Well,
pick it a little bit.
So we have to have the public hearing.
Right.
And we've done them both ways. We've done it at planning and zoning and we've done it at regular council. And I think the question becomes, do you want to do it at planning and zoning or do you want to do it at council?
Typically, planning and zoning would forward the recommendation to the council, so I would,
Correct.
that's how I would recommend it.
And then the public hearing is after that.
Public hearing would occur, planning and zoning would take action to make a recommendation at that point to council, and then council would make a decision.
I think my general thoughts are the public hearing should be separate from a council meeting. So a special council opinion.
so correct me if I'm wrong. It's the 26th of August. If we set, so like during council, if we get the draft and we meet for council in September, can you guys set the public hearing then for the same night as planning and zoning in October? Is that
Or does
pushing it
planning
out too
and zoning
far?
have
You
to set
need, you need 3 weeks, you need 2 weeks. plus.
Publication.
And the two journal's gonna have it on Tuesday for the following Monday, so it starts the following Monday, so
So
you're
it's
gonna
gonna
need
be
3
a-
weeks.
Is the public hearing a planning?
We
and
would
zoning
make 3
meeting?
weeks.
Traditionally, yes.
We would be.
It
at
can
3
be done at the
weeks
council level if people wanted to.
If we set it at the next council.
You just have to make sure that the journal would have it by 2 o'clock or by noon on a Tuesday to print the following.
That would
Monday.
be the problem.
And we don't necessarily have to decide these next steps tonight. If we know our next step is give this to Soren, come back on the 9th, look at a draft, we can pin down the details that night too, potentially.
What,
With Soren and we're kind of guessing
Yeah.
on 2 weeks. There is also a holiday in there, which I know was only 1 day, but in my experience, that usually leads to more than a 1-day delay. So we'd probably say for 3 weeks for him to return something to us. So maybe we just need to choose that date.
September 16th would be 3 weeks.
And are we wanting to do another joint meeting to review that draft as a whole? Yes, okay.
I guess another consideration is
I'm sure you do.
better if Soren can be with us, then I don't have to have.
That is true.
Uh, So maybe we make it contingent upon him being available that night, even if it's by Zoom. Zoom's fine probably for
Right.
this, but that would be good. Then you guys can get answers directly from him on things.
It is Wednesday.
September 16th at
Yes.
6 p.m.
And if he's not available, then we could just look at the calendar, Alyssa maybe, and communicate an alternate plan.
Yes.
All right.
You guys. figure
Jesse,
out-
are you making that a motion? You're making that a motion, Jesse?
Yes.
Okay.
Second.
You guys pick the date.
A motion and a
Rough
second.
date.
Everybody's okay with the 16th?
And that's just to review the next draft.
Correct.
Review this next draft.
It's not an
It's
action.
all good, it'll go to.
providing that
I'm
Soren
not
is
gonna be here that
available.
night. I just want to make sure I'm not going to miss business.
So you would, yeah, you would be able to, that planning and zoning then
Yeah,
have.
yeah, and I'll have it ahead of time if I want to send copies to that
Correct,
meeting.
yep,
And then we can decide that.
correct. And the next steps.
Except planning zoning, yeah.
Thanks, Keith.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
And if people come up with other questions, things you didn't think of tonight, feed them to Alyssa or I, and we can share them with Soren to add to our list for consideration.
Okay,
Thanks, Greg.
very good.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, everybody. We're adjourned.